Welcome to board meeting of NHS Improvement. A very warm welcome in particular to Sir Malcolm Grant, Chair of NHS England, who's joining us today for the public session. Malcolm, I think it was a year ago that I joined your board, and I think the spirit of collaboration between our two organisations is very good. So you're warmly welcome, and I know we'll want to contribute to our conversations about some of these board papers. We have apologies from Glynnis, Breakwell and Lord Carter this morning. Everybody else is here. Eva is with us, who is looking after our board effectiveness and development, and will come back at the end of the private session with some reflections about the way in which we're moving forward. Are there any new declarations of interest which colleagues would like to raise for items on the agenda? Good. Minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of September. Are they a fair record of the conversation that took place and the matters arising which are set out in the action log? And we have, I think, in terms of the first action, we have Peter Wyman joining us at the January board, which will be another great piece of evidence of the collaboration that we have between our organisations, as we'll see as we go through today's agenda. And all the other items are completed, apart from the risk assessment, which we're going to do at the next development session of the board. And we're looking forward to that very much, Richard, under your stewardship.
Chair, would it be appropriate as well to extend an invitation at some point to HEE to come and come to a board meeting?
Yes, we should do that. I mean, I'm extraordinarily keen, as you know, having worked on the National Improvement and Leadership Framework for the last 14 months, which is quite frankly ready to go, and which we've been socialising between our all of our organisations and our providers, and Malcolm and Peter Wyman and Duncan Selby and the other chairs of the arm's length bodies have committed to the pledges that are inherent in that document around the way in which we interact with ourselves and behave. So I think we should have HE there, particularly since the critical component of workforce is, quite frankly, one of the key risks, as we'll see in December, around things. Yeah. So let's mark that forward. Ruth is leading on this and will be dealing with the workforce component of the risk session we've got at the board development day in December. And I know you've got lots of data which you'll be bringing to us at that point. Thank you. Caroline. Any other items before we move to Jim's report?
So every time I do this, I say it's been a busy period, and I think that's a really serious understatement of what's going on at the moment. So since we last met, myself with other execs have been out and about quite a bit, done a number of provider visits. We've had 2 days of planning sessions with chairs and chief execs a few weeks ago, which was really useful. And I think you can see the huge effort that's gone into trying to stabilise the NHS in the results today. So the Q2 results that we'll talk about later on absolutely aren't a finished product, but they show a huge effort in getting us to half time in being broadly there or thereabouts. So still an enormous amount of work to do in the next quarter, and there's a lot of energy in the system going into planning for next year and the year after as well. So I think it's fair to say that everybody in the system's really trying hard to manage all of those demands. I think they're really struggling with demand in the system from a patient point of view. So you can see that in the ED numbers in the Q2 report, and you can see it every day. It's been building recently as well in the last few weeks, and I think with all that we just need to keep safety and quality in our mind and patient experience in all of this as the system becomes more pressured over the winter period. So we've got a lot of activity going into that. We've touched on in the report later on, I don't think we're actually measuring that all very well anymore. So there's a lot of pathways that have been developed in recent years that we've just started for the first time today to start registering some of that. And I think that'll be a programme of work we'll take forward over the next few weeks as to how providers have found ways of coping with demand and pressure to look after patients more safely. It's not actually adequately reflected in the statistics, which we will need to act upon over the next few months. And I think that was really striking when I went to Hull and Airedale and a few other places in October to see how they had found new ways of coping with peaks in demand, etc. So I think we should spend a bit more time on that when we unpack the data a little bit further. And then just finally, one of the things we've just got to be wary of is the commentary on the NHS is unduly negative. It's very hard to get a balanced or positive view given of what's actually going on out there. And I think colleagues will agree, hopefully, when you're actually out there, you see 99% of our staff are working phenomenally hard and doing wonderful things, even in our most troubled organisations. And I think we have a collective duty to just try and make sure that that's balanced in our discussion. Because a number of times recently, clinical staff have mentioned that to me and complained really that they just don't feel like their efforts are being recognised. They're working in extreme pressure and often doing wonderful things. And I think we just should try and stay focused on that. So I think, other than that, I think the rest's covered in the agenda. We'll be happy to pick things up as we go through.
Any particular questions for Jim at this stage on his perspectives? We'll come back to some of the items later on. We've got STPs and financial performance on the agenda. Does anybody want to pick up the point about the workforce and the narrative around how hard our teams are working?
A question on the latter. Obviously, influencing the tonality of a public discourse is very difficult. It's certainly not something one organisation or one provider can do. Is it, and part of that presumably is also the political domain, where necessarily, perhaps, much of the discussion is going to be about stuff that's going wrong rather than stuff that's going right. So what do you think we can do, perhaps in collaboration with the other arms and bodies, to start to influence that discourse to be more balanced?
Yeah, we've had some initial discussion about how we do that across the ALBs, and we're trying to organise a dinner or a lunch of the ALB chief execs before Christmas, where we can have a kind of stock take on where we are and agree how we do that as a collective better. And so one single example would be a lot of the negativities about the money. And I think some of that's because we report our results in segments. So it's like Marks and Spencer only ever producing results on food and not the rest that, or bits that are unprofitable rather than the bits that are profitable. Yeah. So so I think there's a collective effort about it. It's just getting a bit better organised how we do that. And we're trying to do it with our poll, and we've got some work going on now about how we promote the good practice and how we share it and make it more visible, but not go too far and oversell it. So I think in all of this it needs balance, but it does need a concerted effort. So there's more we can do across national bodies, and how we support local effort and getting local messages across.
Any other perspectives? Aaron?
Ed, Jim talked about the morale and the negativity. It's actually more than that. It's not just the recognition of it. It's not being able to do the job as well, which actually hurts you more, I think. On average, you're right, the demand is increasing. And on the other side, patients aren't leaving hospitals for all sorts of reasons. But if you look at the demand, it's mostly emergency demand. So all the elective work, 2 out of 3 is being cancelled, and in all aspects, including what would have been considered in the past as non-negotiable, a cancer case being cancelled. So, that creates significant tension between the clinical practitioner, whether you happen to be the nurse or the physician looking after the patients and the patients. So it's not just not feeling loved, it's about being able to execute what you're there to do. And I think that really reinforces the whole thing again and again. It's sort of self-fulfilling, and that's quite, and everyone feels that they're disengaged from above, and that's, you know, the combination of these 2-3 factors are very demoralizing.
We hear that a lot, Ara, and Kathy and Ruth and others keep reminding us on our actions over winter to make sure we do prioritise patients appropriately. The system's in extreme, it's under extreme pressure, and we do. I think similar to the financial reset, we need a bit of a kind of operational and a prioritisation reset to just try and get some of those things back in order.
Kathy, you wanted to come in on?
Yes, I might just pick up on that. A couple of things really. I agree with Ara that, you know, people are under huge pressure, and therefore that does lead to morale issues. In terms of, as an organisation, what can we do? What should our position be to try and support that? And I think where we've got, and we're talking about improvement later, but where we've got opportunities to help support organisations to do things even more effectively and efficiently, they get a bit of headroom. Because actually, when you talk to people, it is that there is no space in their time, in their day, in their shifts or whatever to actually think or whatever, or even have any downtime. Never mind about how do they move patients through so that they can do all the elective things as well. So I think there is something there about if we can reduce that variation. So in other words, some of the things we're doing, if we can get those rolled out, should help overall. Because I'm optimistic about these things, I think they should help. I think the morale thing as well, there are some general issues, but there are some pockets as well of specifics. And I think working across the organisations, we should be and are trying to support some of those specific things. So, and I think on the keeping patients safe, the more we can do to help, rather than a piecemeal approach across organisations, if we can help with guidance from where works really well, people don't have to try and reinvent all of that. So I think there's a range of things, but we're quite well positioned, I think, to support a lot of that and point people to where it is working better, because it isn't exactly the same everywhere. It's variation that we can help with.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the public communication as opposed to internal within the service. From where I sit, I see a lot of very good activity going on, both within providers and elsewhere in the system. But we have yet to see the fruits of that, and that's normal. That's not, something to beat ourselves up about. But I would therefore be quite cautious about trumpeting success before we've actually seen it. It's better to continue to remind people of the magnitude of the task without getting all tragic about it, and wait to celebrate the successes, at least from the rooftops, until we actually have them in the bank, both in terms of finances and the quality. So many governments, and I know this is not, we're not politicians, reduce their credibility with the public by announcing success before they've actually seen it, and I would like to see us avoid falling into that trap.
That's a fair warning. I want to come back to Ara's point, because I think this is quite important. There's a point at which the drop into helplessness is actually quite dangerous, because I think you go through a phase of people going, this is very tough, we have to make some choices. We're making choices that we're not awfully comfortable with, but we can make them. That takes you a certain way. The system is running really, really, really hot, so people don't have the time to think of new ways and different ways. You have an inability in the short term to redesign things that actually will relieve and make things easier. And so this sort of slight descent into a sense of helplessness then begins to take over. And that's the point at which this becomes insidiously difficult. And I think that's your warning, isn't it, Ara, that we're sort of close to that point. And that comes to the continued encouragement, the support that we can give as professionals, as an organisation, the help, and also, as we talked about before, Laura, the desire to take some of this burden of regulation away, and we are going to start that. So we start doing that. But the time to get some of those things moving is a bit slower than the here and now, which people, when I go to a hospital, I see every day, you know, people working incredibly hard, incredibly dedicated to the job, and yet this slight sense of a descent into it's getting really, really difficult. Ruth?
Yeah, I agree, Chair. I think many clinicians across England are working well above the hours that they're paid to work. You know, day in, day out, not just the last couple of weeks of January and February. It's been working now for that. You know, some of those clinicians are tired. They've been working that. Some of the work that Jane Cummings and I as CNO and I are doing is just trying to get one message, to speak one message, one voice to the directors of nursing and also to frontline staff. If nothing else, just to say that we recognise the difficulty, we recognise and we thank them for that. But we've also wanted to make sure that we remind people of their role in maintaining quality through the winter period, because it's going to be really tough. And it is directors of nursing, along with their medical director colleagues, that have the role, like Kathy and I have with Jim and other exec colleagues and this board, to make sure that we continue to focus on the patient as a priority during this winter.
So we've got Val.
Could I just add, because it's more than our own with yours, is primary care in GPs. The same pressures are being felt there quite acutely, and we have tried to counter that with the GP forward view, with shifting a greater proportion of our total resource into primary care, particularly into general practice, but also trying to change the model of general practice from its dominant single-handed or dual-handed practice to one which has a wider scale and a broader remit. And I think giving people an understanding that there is an alternative way of doing primary care, enforced by a new set of relationships with the acute sector and a new set of relationships with technology. I think we're going to see a change in generation coming through primary care for various reasons. Practitioners are retiring at a young age. Those are the people with the greatest experience and probably the greatest intuitive ability to treat patients. And we're trying to tackle the drivers of those changes to try to hold on to very good, sort out with Ed and with others some of the estates issues that are dogging primary care. But please, primary care is a critical part also of this overall picture of stress and workload.
Absolutely, as you say, they're a critical part of the provider community, and we're all part of a system.
I do think, one other point that is important in this is the role of leadership. And I think when you're going through very difficult times and staff are feeling disempowered, which I think is a strong point, leaders can make a very big difference to how people feel. I think not empathizing, but also pulling together and getting team working, and that goes from all of us, and particularly probably the three of you, down through chairs of hospitals, chief executives, everywhere. And the more we can do to support leaders elsewhere in the system, particularly during the next few months, I think is going to be really crucial. It can make such a big difference, and a leader who evinces powerlessness themselves and drowning themselves will make bad matters worse.
I agree. So I agree with all that. I just go back to Ara's point. I think that the thing that we've all got to find somehow is a way of shifting and managing demand better, because it's in danger of crowding out absolutely every area for us, and it's a thing that makes the spending review difficult, it makes delivery of the forward view difficult, and it makes clinician morale impossible if they're not able to do what they're trained to do, etc. So there are some examples of it down probably a small scale where people are trying to gradually shifting things now. I think again a bit more of let's make that more transparent. If something's worked somewhere, let's understand it, see if it's replicatable, see if it can be scaled up, etc. So I'd agree with all the collective comms and leadership effort that our clinical staff, I think, will be rightly watching us to see whether something is done about that. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble.
So this is part of a much larger debate, but we should, recognise the huge amount of work being done across primary, secondary, tertiary care and social care in difficult circumstances and with limited resources. It comes back to Caroline's point also about workforce and workforce design, which we need to come back to.